I get asked a lot, what is devrel, developer advocacy, all those, evangelists, all those sorts of things. And people also ask me, how can they get into it? Do they have to go down a certain route? There's certain things they have to do. And so I started making notes, and I was going to create a video on it. And I think actually Sangeeta's on the call. And I think she was one of the people who prompted me to actually action and do something about it. Because I'd always give my answer and just kind of, I don't know, move on, I suppose. And when I started really thinking about it, I thought, you know what? I don't want to answer this because it's just my perspective. And so I thought it'd be really good if I could throw some starting questions out there. We could all go through them, I suppose, one by one. And the people who do want to jump in and share their thoughts and opinions and ideas on it, can just jump in, say this is being recorded. So then I'll get the video edited and I'll put it on my YouTube channel. So we'll do an intro for the video. And I'll chop out, I'll edit it. So we have like the best parts. So if you make a mistake, don't worry, just kind of pause and repeat the sentence or repeat it differently, however you want. So don't worry about getting it perfect first time. So yeah, I wanted to give different perspectives and how people can get into it, because I believe a lot of people are actually already doing kind of this role in maybe a small part, maybe not like, kind of 50-50 with what they're doing at the moment, but they're on social. They might be sharing some small tips. So they're kind of like dipping their toe in the water. And that's what I believe. I know some people disagree with me, and that's what I'm really interested to hear. But that's basically it. Like I said, I do have some questions. I do have like 8 questions, but if people want to share more, then please just say it and go into it. And if other people have any other ideas on questions, then please ask and let other people answer. I think it'd be really good to get a rounded perspective on what it is and how to get into it, and what I guess a general day looks like for us. I know there probably isn't a typical day, but that's one of the things we need to discuss. What does everyone think? Is everyone feeling, talkative? Does anyone have any questions? Also, thumbs up. Okay, that's awesome. So I've kind of given it away a bit. My first question was, what is devrel, advocacy, evangelist? Maybe there's some other words people call it as well. And so what is that? What does it mean? What does it mean to you? Just jump in, and we're recording, so all is good. Don't all jump in at once.
I'm going to jump in then. Given this, I've been away for a couple of weeks, and I've been trying to not think about this stuff quite so much. I think it's interesting in many respects that we sometimes use these words interchangeably: evangelist, advocate, developer relations, and that is both good and bad. I did a talk at DevrelCon a couple of years ago, and I just began to think through it to have a framework to do with time. And so whilst not everybody does all of these things all of the time, and some people are quite specific in their roles, I felt that sort of developer relations is quite in the moment. You're there, you're trying to do a talk, understand what, how people are reacting to the talk that you're giving, or the experience that you're putting forward. And it's kind of in the moment education and community building. I think that the developer advocacy is sort of a bit more after the fact. So you've done the developer relations activity, you have engaged with your community, you have learned from them, they've given you feedback, they've explained some, janky edge with the CLI or whatever it is, they've explained something that you can really bring back. I think that advocacy is sort of, to me, to do with that, bringing it back to the team. So you've got developer relations is that in the moment thing. You've got advocacy, which is your role as an advocate for your community, and therefore ideally it's part of the sort of product management cycle. It's not just reporting to marketing. And And then I think that one of the things we don't necessarily talk enough about in devrel is developer experience, which is before the fact. So before you go out and, what are the things that you could do to make a great developer experience that attracts someone to your platform? So creating great documentation, really thinking about interesting sample apps that people might want to build, making it easy to access that API, having perhaps the free tier for any developer. And developer experience, I think, as I say, it's sort of that's trying to get everything right, really thinking about how the developer will respond. Then developer relations, as I say, is in the moment. I've got these things that I built. Let me tell you about them. Let me show you them. And then advocacy is like, I went out, I did my job, I learned from my community, and now I've really got to take this back to the team, and hopefully we can then feed that back into developer experience and have a life cycle. So that's my sort of long-winded. I just tried to sort of think about some of making them less interchangeable and thinking about what some of those different functions are.
I love that. I do interchange them a lot, so I'm probably like the worst at that. So that was brilliant. That explained a lot for me. So thank you. Does anyone else have thoughts or opinions or ideas they want to share on that? Or I'm happy to jump on to the next question as well.
I just wanted to say that I heard something from someone else that sounded a lot what James was saying about the first part, is that being a developer advocate is being the representative of the community in the company, and then being representative of the company to the community.
Nice.
Just doing message passing.
So lots of people nodding, so it's good. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt someone?
Oh, I was just saying, our job is mostly just message passing and a little bit of translation between internal talk and what external people need to hear, want to hear.
Andrew, can I ask who you report through in terms of that message passing?
So I report through marketing right now. But I work a lot with product management and sales and directly with the engineers. We're a new team, so a lot of that's still trying to be figured out. And my previous role was technical marketing, even though I was doing the same stuff. So I already had the relationships with PM and sales and the engineers there, so I can leverage those, and it's really nice.
Thanks.
So this is my favorite part. How did you all get into this? Like, what was your background? I know you've probably all got different backgrounds, which I think is just so interesting. So this is where I hope a lot more people kind of jump in and share their story. So I'm sure you all didn't do the same. Yeah, I'll shut up now. You carry on.
I'm a software developer with a writing problem. I mean, I've been giving conference talks as not a beginner engineer necessarily, but as a mid-level engineer. I didn't have the funds to be at conferences. No employer in a mid-level web agency is going to send you to a conference. But if you speak at a conference, you can go attend all the other talks and learn all the things and make a lot of professional progress. I resisted devrel for many, many years. I've only been devrel for 4 years now, even though I've been on the conference circuit for 12 years. So it's, too much software, too much telling other people about the software. Now here I am.
Awesome.
I'm just very much kind of, sorry.
Go for it.
I was frustrated with a lot of tooling. I was frustrated with the developer experience. And so my journey into this kind of came from a position of pain. I felt a lot of the pain that people around me were feeling, and I wanted to do something about it. And I wanted to help other people so they didn't feel the pain that I was feeling. And that naturally almost led into an evangelism and an advocacy role, because I was then helping with the tooling and other things to help reduce, not completely get rid of, but reduce the level of pain that people have when they're using various bits and pieces.
funny. I feel like I also come to this role from a position of pain, but not the same kind of pain at all. My background, starting like 8 years before today, I guess now, time flies, was I was a kind of a marketer with a capital M, and it was getting, you know, I don't know, it just wasn't the world for me. And I kind of fell into DevRel by accident, through someone introducing me to a small startup in Montreal that was launching an API as a product company. And I barely even knew what an API was, but somehow managed to nab that role and inundated myself in all of the things API and DevRel at a really interesting time, like in 2011, 2012, when like SendGrid and Twilio and all these APIs as product companies were starting to surface and get funded. So I still feel like it's an incredible opportunity because folks are so open to connecting with each other. And it's still a new opportunity for a lot of people. And we're so, I don't know, it feels like a really supportive group of folks. Like just by the nature of DevRel, you want to connect with other products and teams and APIs. It's literally like, you know, integrations coming together and relationship building. So I just feel like I'm probably getting a little off topic here, but coming into it as kind of by accident, it seems to be a similar story for a lot of folks. But I am starting to notice some folks being like, I actually want to pursue developer advocacy as like an early stage job, which is an interesting sign of maturity of this discipline.
So I was a software engineer at a small startup where I was integrating in a lot of APIs because we were just like covering the basics of things that we needed to build out for marketing and sales and stuff like that. And so there was like that pain factor of like, this experience of these integrating these APIs could be better. Like these companies could have done a better job. And then at the same time, I was tasked with, we were wanting to open up a public API, and I was tasked with like, go create docs for our API. And so, yeah, so that was like very, but I was still like seen as a software engineer. I was on the engineering team. But for 3 years previous to that, I had been building out a student developer community at my university, which was like in the first kind of round of university hackathons being a thing. You know, now I'd say we're probably in like the second or third generation of that. And so there was this like, I really like doing this thing. I'd really like to keep on doing it outside of the university space, but I also still really want to stay close to engineering. And so finding that kind of hybrid made a lot of sense for me. I didn't see myself as someone who really wanted to like spend the whole day focused on engineering challenges and tasks, but I didn't want to leave that at the same time.
I've had a lot of people, say that they don't want to leave the engineering, they still enjoy it, but not necessarily do it like 100% of the time. I think I'm one of those people. I love it, but it's just the community side is just, I love that as well. So that really resonates. Such great stories as well. Really, really good to hear. I'd love to hear some more if people want to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming right out of college, 11 years ago or so, I knew that I really didn't, I was getting a degree in computer science. I knew that I didn't really want to do that. I didn't like the programming 100%. And I had taken a contract at Oracle, and I really didn't like that. And I had a previous manager call me up going, hey, how do you like travel? Do you want to travel the world? And hired me into a technical marketing position, which DevRel as a name, I don't think really existed at that time. And that's what I was doing. I mean, it was the same work. I was basically looking at our developer tools and creating content about here's how you actually use them. Here's the outside of here's just documents on like what the API is. It's like here's how to actually do it. And I found that way more interesting because it was like you can have the empathy for the user. You can have you can have figure out your business processes and how they relate, as well as how do you actually use the tool effectively in a way that's not super painful for the end user. and I loved that part of it. And I pretty well just kind of stayed along that in different careers, and only maybe 4 months ago I finally got a devrel title job.
Titles are quite funny. I had one of my clients say that we want you to do DevRel stuff, but we haven't got budget for that. So we're going to put you in as I'm a full stack developer, but we're going to put you in a full stack developer, but you're going to be doing DevRel side and help us organize hackathons and mentoring and so on, help us with the community. But if anyone asks, you're doing coding all the time. So you can call me what you want, I don't mind. But it was just kind of weird in a weird way. They obviously have some internal politics, which I do not miss.
There has to be a budget to pay for these things, Eddie. And yeah, it looks like they found a way to do that. One thing I find interesting is that out of people, the fact that 2 people say they come at it from pain, that's one of the slightly scary things about my understanding of DevRel practitioners. Just because they do tend to be, you tend to be empathetic people, and you take on a lot of stuff, carry a lot on your shoulders. One of the concerns I have as an industry actually is just that, it's like DevRel's looking after everyone else, but who's gonna look after DevRel? But
hopefully mental health is part of your compensation.
I do have a question coming up in a bit on that. Don't spoil it. No, I'm joking. If you want to jump in now, I can always edit it around later. But yeah, I have a question later on.
Everything we've talked about here, it's interesting because people have been saying kind of what pushed them almost into DevRel. For me, actually, there was a major pull as well, which is that I didn't want to be just writing code day in, day out, responsible for production code. And more than that, I wanted to actually get a role where I had elements of marketing, of documentation, of sample generation. I haven't necessarily got the same kind of pressures, different pressures obviously, but I haven't got the same pressures that a full-time developer has. And that's not a negative away from a full-time developer. For me, it was very much a positive of a role such as this. It was a pull rather than a push, if that makes sense.
One thing I'd add is someone who gets a lot of fulfillment out of helping people. You can help people on a software engineering team. You help your teammates, you boost everyone else around you, especially if you move into leadership of a team. But it's it's helping on a larger scale most of the time. Unless you have a certain position within a large company, but it's that helping piece, making that experience for people and seeing them get excited about those things because you made that experience better.
I want to expand on what Taylor said and what SJ said about the relationship aspect of it and helping people. That was what really got me into it. I have a background in events, which is what led me to HashiCorp in the first place. And then being at our conferences and at our company events and meeting people, it was definitely clear early on that was something I wanted to get more into, and the building relationship side of things.
And it's interesting when companies have a bigger team and they have people in the team from, I'm guessing HashiCorp's probably a really good example. You've probably got people in your team, Katie, who've come in from a different way, who are, have a different point of view, but then that must add so much value to that because you've got different backgrounds, different experiences.
For sure. And we have all different levels of career, people that are, coming in to round off their career, and then people that are also coming in to start their career in that role.
Yeah, fresh pair of eyes adds so much value. And I say this all the time. I say it on my live streams. I think only today I was saying to someone, oh, I'm new. They're saying I'm new to open source. I don't know how I can help. Have a look. What does it make sense? That's helping so much. That means we haven't done something right. And there's always going to be gaps. And just keep lowering that barrier to entry over and over. And they asked a really good question. I won't go into it now, but they asked a really good question. They said, oh, simple question. And I actually couldn't answer it because I hadn't thought of that certain situation on how to contribute to a pull request that's in a repo that you haven't got access to. And we figured it out, but it's really interesting. It's never thought of that scenario and we made it work. But it was a great question. I learned a lot. So there's so much value in that.
So on that note, Eddie, I'll just jump in. Priyanka Sharma, that's recently took over as general manager of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. She, in her talk yesterday, just did a really good job of articulating all of the different folks that are providing value in their ecosystem. So, you know, people writing documentation or anything else. You know, very often we as an industry obsess about the code. That's one of the sort of, you know, the things with the DevRel people is that they're saying there's more to life than code. But it was really interesting to see, you know, that organization, which has very, very much been predicated on, you know, it's like, you know, here's Kubernetes, you know, here is the surrounding set of software technologies. I thought it was a really nice articulation by her about all of those other roles. So maybe that's something that you could point at when people ask, how can I, you know, how can I be involved in open source? Because clearly not everybody is going to be the prime sort of maintainer of a project.
One
No, really good.
small, oh,
Sorry,
go ahead.
no, carry on.
I was going to say the one small example of that is I'm on the marketing committee for the Open API initiative, and we're a wide swath of people from community folks, PMs, developers, folks on technical marketing within their companies and stuff. And even that's even like a smaller project than some, you know, massive like Kubernetes, for example. But yeah, like that's just like one example of that.
Wesley, I feel like you've tried to nearly say something a couple of times and then politely step back. So what can you, I mean, especially given that Eddie with his editing magic can make what you say appear anywhere at any time. Like what was the, if you don't mind me shining the spotlight, what we gonna jump in on?
I was basically I'm saying what everyone else said, is that my personal journey is I was a developer, a product development engineer, and then I missed being with people, hearing people, and felt like the abstraction of being behind a screen made me feel less in touch with the users and that empathy. And I would say to me, this is an imperfect example, but it's the difference between sociology and psychology, and where in sociology you're studying groups and how groups move and groups act, and when you're working on a product, you're thinking of the larger groups. But when you are doing a more like a psychological practice, you're working one-on-one, you're hearing how the lens of the world is seen through their eyes, and it allowed me to learn more about perception of things just in general, coming from that angle, rather than just thinking about how groups see things, but hearing the one-on-one story, the individual stories, the individual pain points, and finding ways to address them eventually trickled up into helping larger groups, because even though their perspectives were different, fixing one thing seemed to change how the overall product felt for everyone. And so that kind of made it feel as though hearing those edge cases, hearing how to make things, just a small thing, really impact someone's life, was one of the things that attracted me to DevRel.
Nice, thanks, James. For I didn't notice, so sorry, Wesley. But James, thanks for pointing that out.
I just want to say that Wesley always has the best analogies. You always have good analogies, Wesley.
So Wesley, when does the news happen? When do we get to find out about your news? Is that soon?
I don't know. I start my new role in September 1st, but I want to make sure that it's a good fit before I start like letting people know.
Okay,
you can tell us. We won't tell anyone.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, but I'm super excited. I can't wait until you feel like you're in a position to talk about that, because obviously, for many, many reasons, now is not a super awesome time to be looking for a new role. And I'm just really proud of you for getting out there and getting yourself something during the Rona. So
thank you, James. I really appreciate all your help to help push me in the right direction and to reinforce my damaged ego and self-esteem along the way.
yeah, I'm just super excited to see what that is.
That reminds me as well. Could everyone share like one social link in the chat, so therefore I can put your like Twitter handle or your LinkedIn handle, whatever it is, and I'll just copy and paste them into my notes, because otherwise I'll get to editing and I'll forget. So, and when you get a moment, share on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you want, and I'll just include it in the video as well, and in the description below too.
Decide if I should share my Twitter or my LinkedIn, because I say a lot of things on Twitter.
Right? Same here.
Oh,
Most
me.
are not appropriate.
I don't know. Twitter is usually better. Right? Let's see. Some people have gone for LinkedIn. Okay, Twitter's winning at the moment. Ryan has gone for something. I don't know if I'm guessing that's Twitter, but I know people use the @ for everything, for GitHub, for so on. So okay, it looks like it's neck and neck. Yeah, neck and neck. All right, brilliant. Thanks everyone.
I like LinkedIn just so if I can open up my network to anyone. James, I know we've talked about this before in the past, but like it's hard to look right now. But if anyone is looking, I do have about 5 open, more senior roles that I know of, both at devrel, developer marketing, and developer growth. So just ping me.
James, you're muted.
I feel like I know what it is, but what's developer growth? That sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's public, so I can share. Blockstack's looking. If you know Blockstack.io, they're the first SEC like listed blockchain out there. So there's some really interesting stuff. Oh yes, and go follow Joni Helen Blueberry, SJ's cat. She's amazing. It will light up your day. 2 thumbs up for that.
I was actually asking what specifically is developer growth. Like, I feel like that's maybe, I mean, that's a term that is not as well known, perhaps. It sounds like a lot of pressure. What's developer growth?
I think people are kind of trying to figure that out, but from what I've gleaned from a few companies, Akamai's looking to FYI, is they're really thinking about it in terms of customers. Their developers are their main focus and their customer. And so they're looking at, for like, you know, basically like you would customer success and attrition, they're doing that for developers. And so growth, same exact department, same exact setup. But I'm actually seeing it report to either sales or chief customer officers now.
Does that mean deepening the relationship with already existing customers so that they move from novice to committed to evangelist?
I think that's part of it, and it's also opening up the top of the funnel as well. Does that make sense, or does that seem like a non-answer?
Well, to Eddie's point, well, in fact, not to Eddie's point, I guess to everybody's point, it's not a super well defined sector still. I always find it kind of interesting because I'm actually officially an industry analyst, and there are all sorts of weird backgrounds that people have found themselves as an industry analyst. But then there's this interesting thing where there is an Institute of Industry Analyst Professionals, Industry Analyst Relations Professionals, they call themselves, who are like the relations folks dealing with us, but we're not professionals, we're just people that lucked out, So it's kind of interesting, and I do think there are some similarities with devrel where it is still quite young as a, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of that sort of surrounding definitional work for these different tracks. Like, oh, I'm a, developer growth person, or, people are always required to do everything rather than being allowed to focus on one thing. And I think that's definitely a challenge for folks that I know, because, I mean, it's good because everyone can create their own role. You can be like Lorna and like, I knew, you know, this is what I do and I'm going to do it really well. Or perhaps maybe that's the advantage of DevRel, that it isn't well defined. But I think in terms of that question about newer people that now do see it as an early stage in their career, I think there are a whole bunch of interesting issues around, you know, I see some quite negative attitudes sometimes from people that are like, oh, you know, I've been an engineer for 15 years and who are you to go out and, you know, educate about an API? And I think, you know, that's sort of suboptimal. I think any time that you're gatekeeping in that way, that's not really ideal. But we haven't yet found a way of articulating a career path where we are allowing those newer voices to, enabling and supporting those newer voices to come in as easily as they might. I think that's one thing I'd like to see the industry do a better job of, because yeah, why not? Put it this way, I think one of the things as Andrew said about like traveling, and I guess this is a very Flyless question, because it used to be that the DevRel people did more air miles than anyone else, except maybe sales, or Lorna, who doesn't travel. But I think that there has been this thing of let's see, how would I put this? I think younger people in general are probably going to want to travel more. That's maybe, is that bad? Can I say that? Anyway, I think in general, I mean, certainly, you know, me as a parent and stuff, I don't want to be on the road all the time. And I do think that like DevRel quite often makes sense for younger folks that are in a position and perhaps even want to travel. Like, I don't really want, like, vacation, I'll travel with my family, but I don't want to travel anymore in business. So like, it's so natural, as an industry, because it's been based on travel, for that to be the case. And I think now that we're not traveling so much, that raises all sorts of interesting issues around that. Because if that isn't the primary thing, maybe there's a whole other set of people who could be more effective in DevRel roles, because it doesn't mean they have to be on the road all the time. That was a really bad ramble, I'm sorry.
And I think what you're describing there is, it's a feature. It's not a bug. It's a feature. The ill definition, it's every job, every DevRel job is what you make of it. So I'm like way out on the engineering, SDK, developer experience, API experience end of the spectrum, but it's ill defined. So no one cares that I'm out there. Like, that needs doing for our communities. And there's the freedom for me to do that. And to make a difference in the ways that I always have. It's not true that I don't travel at all, but you're right, I'm grumpy about it. My contract says that I never have to. Because I'm more of a writer, and I would rather support my communities in that way and with usable libraries. For the people coming in early career, there's two sides to it. One is, how do you do that if you're not, like, I do it by building on extensive engineering experience, and I worry a little bit about how people can become very senior in DevRel if we very quickly pigeonhole them into these less technical topics. And I'm sure some of the minorities have had this as well. Oh, why don't you be a project manager? You'd be great at that. You don't really seem like a coder, right? And by pulling people out of the kind of heavyweight job mainstream too early, I worry that we have not young people, but early career people, and that can include career transition as well as straight out of college the first time around. I worry a little bit that we are not giving them the time to build each of those skill sets, where because DevRel wasn't a thing until I'd been an engineer for 10 years, and then I resisted it for 10 years, you know, then that gave me a chance to build up all those things. And I was a blogger for fun and a conference speaker to fund the learning habit. But by bringing people in so early, are we not giving them time to really level up? Are they always going to be sort of middling at some of these things? Do you know, like, I have other concerns about what
at least
very early.
At least for me, because I did kind of go straight from college with some internships to give me some experience, but So much of my experience was actually the building of demos and using the tools. So I built up those engineering skills alongside the rest of the skills. I also was very lucky that, I mean, because I was working at Avaya, which is a grandbaby Bell, I had some amazing engineers for mentors that could really help me there. So a lot of that for me personally was luck and just being in the right place at the right time. But I think you could remove that luck and say, hey, DevRel people need to do, who are early stage in their career, would just need to do engineering tasks as part of their job, so that they learn the empathy for the engineers on the other side as well.
I think
I'd
that's
love to
really,
see us.
oh, sorry.
One sentence. I would love to see us crossing over with our adjacent disciplines more often. A career that goes engineering, DevRel, engineering, DevRel, engineering, DevRel would make loads of sense to me. And for those of you who are on different fringes of this ill-defined shape, it makes sense for you too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one thing I do think, and Andrew raises a really good point there, is that, you know, sometimes using something isn't exactly the same as building something. So you know, maybe you are just really good at thinking of sample apps where I'm like, you know, oh, if I use like the Vonage API and I link that with this other thing, like this AI thing, then I can make something cool, right? So it's like you're kind of saying, almost in that sort of hackathon way. So you could have someone go in and win a hackathon that is not like the comp sci, you know, uber engineer, but is just good at thinking about how you could put these things together and create something interesting. So I think, especially in the world of now that we've got these really powerful APIs, you don't necessarily always have to understand everything about the underpinnings in order to find interesting ways that are compelling that people will use them. I'm not disagreeing, actually, Lorna, that yeah, that ideally, and to Andrew's point, that's one of the routes into understanding more about the platform. But so I think there are some really good DevRel people that are not really senior, but they're really good at thinking about interesting ways that APIs could be used that excite other developers, and then they think, oh my, I could do this too. And there's something really powerful about that. People that just think about interesting applications of those APIs. And it's not always, it is engineering, but it's composition-based engineering. And I think that's really interesting. There are some people that I see them building, you know, and they don't just do it once, they're just always thinking up really interesting applications that you could build with the APIs that the companies they work for are, and other companies, because it is a composition one, are building. And that's one of the, I just think that's a really underestimated, undervalued skill.
I think it's no, go on, carry on. No, Sanjita, please carry on.
So I kind of started with community management, developer community management, when I was in my first year of college. I stepped in because I wanted to be that person who, you know, who stands among a crowd and is talking about a product launch, a developer product launch. But instead, I ended up becoming the person who knows how to analyze a product, who knows that, who doesn't believe in assumptions anymore, who knows how to ask questions. So I think this is one thing that this field has taught me, that how do you ask questions? How do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and then analyze something and then bring in that perspective? So yes, that's something I've learned being here for past 4 years.
How to ask questions.
That sounds like you should
important.
possibly think about being an industry analyst in your future. That is a very good set of skills to have, asking the right questions. And yeah, thanks for jumping in, Sanjita.
I was going to say that that's also a good segue into a product role, to ask the right sort of empathetic questions about, you know, a product.
So glad we're recording this. So many good points. And James, I'm still thinking about your hackathon example. It's so true. I remember going to one hackathon and I was like, right, I'm prepared. I'm going to nail this. It's going to be technically good. So I got a team of engineers of 4 of us, and we had full like CI, CD, like it was set up awesome with automated test. Everything was automated. It was brilliant. We didn't win. We didn't think about the presentation. We didn't think about the user, but engineering wise, I think it was really good. They did say actually, engineering wise, it's good. But in terms of yeah. But on the flip side, I went to a VR hackathon, no idea what I'm doing, didn't prepare, winged it, and we won. Like, how did we win? But it's just because we were such a more of a mixed, diverse group of people that someone thought about the presentation, someone thought about the user, and it really kind of helped us tie it together. And it helped me think about things very differently rather than just thinking about Unity or whatever we were using to build it. The game was terrible, but everyone loved to play it. It was with such big ambitions, and it didn't do 5% of what we thought we could achieve in 2 days. But no one could put it down after they started playing it, which I think was why we won it, even though it was the most useless game ever. A story for another time.
Can I jump in there too? My first role out of college is I worked for Dell in computer support. And so hearing people say like, my computer's not working, you have to ask, is it the monitor or is it the box at the bottom to really understand what they're talking about? And so not that I would say that was that was where I was forged in terms of both customer empathy and asking the right questions, because you have to hear what they're saying, but try to understand what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, regardless of the language they use. And then you have to just make sure you can walk them from point A, saying, this is the problem, to point B, saying, here's how you get to the solution. And you cannot ignore both of those. You have to understand where someone is and to get them to where they need to be. And I think right on 100%, I agree with what was said.
Super strong point, because of course, the last thing you want is the engineer who's an asshole trying to do devrel, because you have somebody that is new to something and the person's immediately being like, oh, you're an idiot, this is like trivial. That's the worst thing that you can hear in any discipline. In fact, it's funny because my kids now, I noticed them using the phrase noob. And I was like, well, you're using that as a negative. And actually, newbies are the lifeblood of any community, anything good in computer science or this industry. Like, celebrate new people, but not everybody is equipped to, not everybody's a good teacher. Not everybody has that patience. So I think that's an interesting point you make, Wesley, about where you came from. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are plenty of brilliant engineers that would be very, very, very bad at developer relations.
But I think in our industry, the fun part is we're all always new. And I stole this from Saron. She gave a talk recently at some online conference, and from Code Newbies, I think it was. And like, I was doing something new, like GitHub Actions, like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I was a newbie for that. I knew what CI was, but I hadn't done GitHub Actions, didn't know how to configure it and all the rest. And I was doing that on a live stream and made lots of mistakes, and it was loads of fun, but we all figured it out together, got something working in the end. But I think we're all always newbie, and that's why we love what we do in our industry. It's always changing. And even if you knew, I know, JavaScript a few years ago, it's going to change now, right? And it's going to change again in a year. There's more features all the time, and that's just, in any language, is part of the fun.
It's interesting because I think Wesley touched on this before about having to have empathy, and ask the right questions. And I think it's also a matter of being able to act as a translator. And we touched on this before. You're translating both ways. You're translating from the company to the community, and you're translating from the users and the community back to the company. And my background is more in marketing, with the technical background as well, but more marketing. And so, coming from that angle, being able to try and understand users, understand who your customer is, what their pains are, I think people in this role understand customers better than anybody else. And it's the lifeblood of any company to have that information, to understand, there's the perception of, hey, we built this great widget, everyone's going to love it. And then the DevRel folks go out and they say, yeah, this didn't go over as well. And here's what everybody really wants. And here's what we really need to do. And it's bridging that gap between the perception and the reality, and really translating what the actual needs are into workable solutions that people not only will want, but actually need.
I'm just conscious of time, so people don't. Oh, James, you're muted. Sorry, were you talking?
No, I think I just said that makes so much sense.
I have a really interesting story from another time about that's a real life example of that as well, which was quite expensive, not for me, but for the company. But yeah, it's so true. I'm just going to rush through some of these questions because I got a few coming up that I think are also interesting. I wish I've done like a 2-hour slot, but I've got another call in like 10 minutes. We've probably touched on a lot of these already. I mean, we talked about, I don't know, we haven't talked about this. What's a typical day for you? I don't know if people want to say something or we just move on to the next one, because I think every day is different, right? But I'll let a few people jump in and maybe say that. So on the video, it's not me saying that. No takers? Okay,
Every
I'll skip on
day
to
is different.
Awesome.
There you go. It's on the record.
Thank you.
Yeah, lots of meetings, lots of whiteboarding.
Waking up to new builds by the community.
Sorry, say that again?
Waking up to new builds from the community. So yeah, it's something I'm really grateful for. And then people are tagging me that, hey, thank you so much for helping us or teaching us this particular framework, and we are building this today. So yeah, and then you suddenly see that, hey, they are suddenly extroverts and they don't mind sharing what they are building with a whole community of thousands of people. So this is something that I'm truly grateful for.
That actually ties me into a question I haven't got on my list. So I'm kind of deviating slightly, but it's quite an important question to me personally. And you bring up a really good point. So I get some people messaging me saying, looks like I show a bit of favoritism to certain people. And maybe I do, and I want to kind of reply why, but I don't know if that's a good thing. But I do because I know they help other people, so it allows me to scale more. So for example, there's a lady in Nigeria who, whenever she messages me, I always reply back because I know she's helping a group of teenager girls in Nigeria get into open source, and I can see their commits and their pull requests coming in. And I love that. So I'm very responsive to say her, for take it as an example, then to someone else who's always like, help me, I need help, I need this. And it's just like, just do a Google. It's the first answer that comes up. I give them, at the beginning, I probably give them, I see James cringing. I don't know if I'm doing this really bad. You're all going to hate me now. But like, I do reply to them. But then after a while, I just think, you never help anybody else. You don't just, I've answered that question for you. Someone else just asked it in Discord. Why can't you reply with how you solved it? And I know, appreciate they might not always be there, but you can notice these things after a few months of who tries to help and who doesn't. Does James hate me now?
This is not the answer.
Honestly, JFGI is a true thing. I mean, someone asked the other day, they were like, what was the thing? They said like, oh, it was like fake advice, like what was the advice you would give to someone in order that they would be a bad programmer? And mine was, don't use Google. Like, of course you should be taking advantage of the assets that we have, like the idea that you would never look at, like before you began we live in a sort of, there is a lot of really good information out there, and we should sort of take advantage of those information assets. Although obviously it's nice to ask people questions as well. But no, I mean, that's a very reasonable, what am I'm going to hate you, Eddie, because you just said you're like trying to help somebody building out the Nigerian ecosystem and working with teenage girls in Nigeria. I think you'll find that's if you know me at all, that's the kind of thing that I'm into. So no, I think you're in good shape.
Okay, thanks. a bit nervous to say that or not. I'm still processing. Okay, I want to rush through these questions then coming up. Any tips, any recommendations you give to people who want to get into DevRel or advocacy or all the other ones? Sorry, I'm saying DevRel, but all of the above. And developer growth, I think, was a new one I learned today from Elizabeth.
I say start poking around in an open source project. Find a GitHub project, ask questions, find a Discord channel or Slack channel, get to know the people who are the main contributors of the team. And that's often a way you'll become really well known or even potentially get a job offer in the future too, or find other work.
For me, I think it's about exactly this, finding ways to practice those skills and kind of decide if you want to move over. Like when I'm interviewing, it's very common to come out of engineering, and that's fine. But if you've never written a blog post and never spoken at a user group and never made an open source contribution, maybe you need to go and try some of those things before you commit to doing DevRel full time. And it'll tell you if you want to be doing that, as well as telling me if you want to be doing that.
I think that's super important. I mean, writing is just so important. If you can communicate, then it's just such an amazing way of scaling knowledge, like writing. So write about your craft and write about your learning journey. I mean, I think in terms of this question about, do you need to be like the fully fledged, incredible sort of engineer that has all of these skills? Actually, and I see this a lot, people say, well, would this be an interesting blog post? Or I'm sure this is a really simple thing. Those are always the best things. Those are always, like, anytime you're asking yourself the question, write it. So I think that writing is a brilliant pathway to comms and technical communications and potentially an advocacy role, because, that's just absolute. I mean, it's important in all areas of tech, but certainly, it's such a useful skill for an evangelist or an advocate. And yeah, honing that skill and practicing and never being afraid to say, actually this thing that seems simple, if I'm having to ask the question, I guarantee you a lot of other people also want that answered. And then to Eddie's point, when someone Googles it, they'll find your blog post and then we'll all be able to move forward. So yeah, no, right. I think that's just absolutely critical.
Taking that point forward.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sangeeta, go.
No, it's okay. You can speak. I can go next.
Sorry. I was going to say, taking that point forward, Elizabeth said earlier about committing to open source, going out, getting involved with things. Those are all very important. But for me, I think developers do that, or most of them do that anyway. But what for me is most important is communicating, is getting into that habit of talking to people. It's very easy to be able to sit down, to write code on your own, to get into your own habits, to understand what you and your team do. But communicating, I think, is one of the key skills that really leads you away from that very highly technical role into something else. And that communication might be standing up in front of people, it might be talking, it might be writing blog posts, it might be doing other things. But that communication is what gives you the visibility of what the pain points are and how you can help externally or internally to your company. So for me, I think communication is the thing that people really need to focus on if they're looking at DevRel. Because if you do that well, then you're going to do well in DevRel.
I think I just wanted to expand on the communication point. I mean, one advice that I can give, and that's something that I followed, is try explaining any technology that you love to people from different backgrounds, from children to old people, and then just see if you're able to do it. I mean, it will not happen in one day, right? You have to keep on practicing, because at the end of the day, it's developer relations, and relationship requires connection. So it's so much important for you to be the person who's connecting with your audience. So yes, this is all I wanted to say.
That's a great point. Can I ask a question? Is it
Sure.
Is it Sangeeta, or is it with a G, a G, or a J? Is it Sangeeta or
Sangeeta?
Sangeeta? Okay, good.
So I'm from India.
Yeah, no, I got slightly, yeah, anyway, fantastic. Sangeeta, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I would say the other thing that you should get comfortable with is making mistakes in public. I think that you have to be able to be vulnerable and not be held back with doing something wrong in front of a lot of people. And I think that keeps you out of spaces, and it keeps you from doing things that will help you grow. And your mistakes are also not just valuable to yourself in terms of growth, but to other people, that they can see that you also are struggling with some of the same things, and that you are learning things, and you could be that person that may get more arrows and stings and bad comments, but you help people feel less alone by letting yourself be vulnerable in that way.
I feel like lessons learned and postmortems are some of the most interesting things to watch and read out there.
Yeah, great, good postmortems are fantastic. By the way, Eddie, did you say you needed to leave? Like,
I do have another call. It's actually with the GitHub team, but I have one last question that I'd love to ask, if it's okay.
Just keep GitHub waiting, whatever. But well, okay, if you want to ask the last question, that's fine, and then we'll thank you. But that's quite funny. Good.
Okay. The last question is, how do you keep a work-life balance so you don't burn out? I get asked this a lot.
I think from my perspective, this is something I've seen from a lot of DevRel people that that does worry me, especially. I mean, it's not as bad. It's different now because we're not traveling, but the travel was really crushing people. And also, I think that one of the things that DevRel people can be prone to is burnout, because the sort of their OKRs and so on can be a little. They're not perhaps as clear as for some other people in the company, and you know, they're doing incredible. You know, you're doing incredible like glue work, you're bringing people together, you're doing all this great stuff, but then someone might be like, well, yeah, but you don't always feel in control of things. Or the organization might go, oh, we've done this successful 20 city tour, so now we're gonna make it a 47 city tour. And you're like, but I didn't really sign up for that. And I do think that there are a lot of, the point I'd like to make, unfortunately, because of the Rona, it's not as an easier one, is that no is your best friend. Like, your company is not your best friend. Your employer is not your best friend. Your best friend's your best friend. And no, the word no, and saying, actually, I can't do that thing. And that's really scary, really hard. But if you don't do that, if you don't ever say no, you can't look after yourself, and you can't look after your teams. You can't look after your family. You can't. So, and in an ideal world, it would be like it was maybe 2 years ago, where it was so hot that I always just said, there are other jobs out there, so say no all the time. Unfortunately, it's not quite as easy at the moment, but I still think that no, a well-placed no is a very important aspect of self-care.
I'd say one thing, years ago on one of the teams I was on, we had a Slack community, and like, it was very easy to see a user ask a question late at night and you want to, you know, answer them. So like, having very clear boundaries of like, when are times you answer and when times you don't. And sometimes that means you're gonna have to tell a community member or a user, like, you know, either tell them or they see somehow you're not gonna get back to them right away. Like, having those clear boundaries with them. It's painful to do, because, you know, you feel like you're disappointing for this person, but like, having those really upfront. And maybe that means you also don't have a in real time chat too. Like, that's part of that. And then the second part of that is like, some of my burnout has not actually come from travel, has not come from overworking. It's come from not having clear goals and metrics, and just having that like two-way street with management, and you know, misalignments of values too, just like what even was DevRel and stuff like that. That is where some of most of my burnout has come from, not from because I was traveling too much, which I always like tried to monitor, and like, not because I was overworking myself. And it was a struggle because at first I was like, and it struggled to realize it even was burnout because I was like, I'm not overworking. That's what gives you burnout. But it often comes from so many other things too.
Yeah, for sure. Lack of agency is a killer.
I'm going to really have to go. If anyone's got any more points to add, it's still going to be recording, so feel free just to get say your points.
I mean, the main thing, Eddie, is thank you very much for this interesting session today. I think it went really well, and it was such a brilliant. It's so you to make it about talking to other people and seeing how they feel and what they're doing, and that's what makes you great. So thanks for joining us again. Really appreciate it. Thank you for being the host this week. And
thank you to everyone for getting involved.
Great to see you again.